It started with a scream that shattered the peace of the Cascade foothills. A scream so sharp and sudden, I swear the birds went silent. You ever hear your own kid wail like that? Way out in the trees? It cuts right through you. That morning, I was up to my elbows in sawdust, tracing my fingers along a piece of history. Rough-cut timber from a 150-year-old cabin I'd just bought with everything I'd left. That smell, old cedar and freedom. It almost felt like a new beginning. And then, like a storm barreling in without warning, Victoria Sterling came marching across my gravel drive, heels pounding out a rhythm like gunfire, waving a stack of crumpled papers as if she meant to knight me or kill me on the spot. She was queen of the Cedar Ridge Enclave, self-appointed tyrant of a neighborhood where the grass was trimmed closer than a Marine's haircut, and every neighbor seemed to shrink when she walked by. She had that air about her, spray-stiff hair, eyes like two frozen ponds, and a mouth set in a permanent sneer. "My Preston deserves this inheritance," she snapped, jabbing a finger in my chest like she expected me to melt on contact. Now, here's the kicker. I'd bought that cabin fair and square at a county auction, cash up front, deed in hand, no back doors, no loopholes. But Victoria, with her HOA board all tied up in her claws after 20 years of ruling by fear, she looked at me like I was some squatter on her family's sacred ground. She couldn't have known, of course, that I'd stumbled onto something in that cabin's root cellar, a secret that could blow her whole little empire sky high. But before the war began, maybe you ought to know what drove me up to those misty hills in the first place. My name's Liam Caldwell, and 6 months before, I was just another burnout in Seattle, shell-shocked from a divorce that left me wondering if there was any justice left in the world. I had nothing, except a small inheritance and my grandfather's gravelly old voice echoing in my head. Measure twice, cut once, and don't let the bastards grind you down. So when I spotted that 1870s relic sitting on a couple acres of forgotten land, I didn't just see a fixer-upper. I saw a lifeline. Silas Vance had died without a will, left the place to rot until the county put it up for auction. The fog clung to the trees like ghosts when I first stepped out there, and the second my hand hit those old beams, I knew this was where I'd start over. I thought I was buying peace. Turns out what I bought was a front-row seat to chaos. The first few weeks were medicine. Just me, the quiet, and the stubborn work of peeling back decades of neglect. That's when I found it. Down in the crawl space below the kitchen, an oilcloth-wrapped, leather-bound journal, reeking of secrets and old earth. Silas's handwriting, page after page, weather, wildlife, and as the years went on, darker things, betrayal, missing lumber, shady deals. And there it was, his entries about a man known only as Arthur, a partner who'd been stealing from him for years. Guess who Arthur turned out to be? Victoria's father-in-law. Victoria lived just up the hill in a mansion that screamed, "Look at me." 5,000 square feet of cold, empty luxury, always looking down on my little cabin. Her husband, Richard, was a man who seemed to apologize just for breathing. Their son, Preston, was 28, bouncing between odd jobs and barely holding himself together. The first time Victoria drove down in her spotless SUV, she didn't knock, she invaded. "You're the new owner," she said, like it was a crime. I tried being civil, but she wasn't having it. "Permit violations, Mr. Caldwell. Cedar Ridge has standards." I explained, careful, that the county had cleared me for restoration. She bared her teeth in a smile that felt more like a warning. And then she rewrote history, right there in my driveway. Silas was my late father-in-law's business partner. There was an understanding. This land stays in the family. Preston has a moral claim. It would have been funny if it wasn't so brazen. She told me to sell it to her son for what I paid. No profit, no questions. When I refused, the gloves came off. Work stops now. $500 a day. Fines starting immediately, pending review by the Legacy Oversight Board. As she drove off, dust swirling behind her, I realized my sanctuary had just become a battlefield. 3 days later, a certified letter landed in my mailbox. Red ink, legal threats, Violations for everything from non-period accurate outlets to unauthorized plumbing, because heaven forbid I didn't want to use an outhouse in the snow. Meanwhile, her own house had a heated driveway and a neon-lit pool. It was pure madness. But instead of yelling back, I went digging at the County Historical Society, where a sharp-eyed librarian named Eleanor helped me pull up photos proving my restoration was spot on. But even more, I kept reading Silas's journal. His words painted Arthur Sterling as a man with no conscience, always scheming, always covering his tracks. That's when it clicked. Victoria's family fortune was built on a century-old pattern of cheating and cover-ups. No wonder she didn't want me poking around. That's when Martha showed up, a neighbor with a weathered face and eyes like hawks. "Son, you're walking into a tiger trap," she whispered. "Victoria's been running folks out of here for decades. Fake parking tickets, flag violations, levies, and liens. She'd force a sale, then buy the property for pennies through her friends. It's always the same story," Martha said, "until someone stands their ground." I remembered a lesson from my divorce. You can't retroactively apply new HOA rules to a house that's been here longer than the HOA itself. It's called the grandfather clause. Victoria didn't back off. She ramped up the psychological warfare, snapping photos of every nail I drove, spreading rumors about transients and lowered property values. Preston would walk by, eyes haunted, muttering about how the place was rightfully his. Then Tom and Chloe, a young couple from down the street, knocked on my door, looking scared. "We're next," Tom said. "She's after our fence now. Just wanted you to know you're not alone." The breaking point came when Victoria marched onto my property with 2 board members and demanded to see my unauthorized excavation. "You're violating county ordinances," she shrieked. I told her, steady as I could, there was no excavation, just cleaning up an old root cellar. The hatred in her eyes? That was something fierce, but I was done backing down. Soon enough, Victoria's attacks turned legal. Monday morning, a county inspector named Jim Miller knocked, apologizing before he even said a word. "Formal complaint about unauthorized structural work," he said, refusing to look at me. "Got to shut you down for at least 2 weeks." That gave Victoria all the time in the world to spin her stories. Rumors that I was broke, maybe running drugs, all of it spreading like wildfire. But see, I'd learned something about fighting dirty, document everything. I hired Elena Rossetti, a bulldog of a lawyer who specialized in HOA bullies. She took one look at my stack of violation notices and grinned, said Victoria was bending the rules until they snapped. Paper trail, Liam. In court, the best documented story wins. So I went all in. Cameras on every corner, records of every interaction. That's when I found the cracks. The HOA meeting minutes had gaps, whole sections missing. The Heritage Fund was leaking money to businesses with suspiciously familiar names. It was embezzlement, dressed up as community management. And then I caught Preston, red-handed, trying my back door with a key. He barely blinked when I confronted him. "Mom says this place is ours." She gave me the keys. That was no mistake. Victoria had given her son access to my house, convinced him it belonged to him. Breaking and entering, plain as day. Late one night, I found the entry in Silas's journal that changed everything. Insurance papers hidden in the foundation, where Arthur's greed can't find them. I started digging. Meanwhile, Victoria pushed through emergency HOA measures, retroactively targeting my work, setting up a legal fund that, according to Elena, paid for her cousin's failing law firm. Then the violence came. Windows smashed, spray paint across my logs. "Leave now." My cameras caught it all. Preston, using the key, calling his mother on speaker. "Done, looks like a break-in." "Good. Get out before he comes back," Victoria's voice replied. "Conspiracy, vandalism, B&E. Deputy Rodriguez, the local cop, saw the footage. "We're going to get her, but we need to make it airtight. Let her hang herself." And hang herself she did. Victoria staged her final act, a fake gas emergency. She stormed onto my porch, beeping device in hand, screaming about a leak. But the detector was just a smoke alarm with a dying battery. As my cameras rolled, she tried to stick violation tags on my outlets, caught in the act as Deputy Rodriguez stepped out, body cam blinking. "Ma'am, we need to talk about filing false emergency reports." But the real blow came the next morning. Elena called, her voice shaking. She'd found the original partnership dissolution papers from the 60s. Arthur Sterling, Victoria's father-in-law, had legally abandoned all claims to the Vance property for a buyout. Victoria's entire crusade was based on a lie. And then, in the foundation, I found them. Insurance papers Silas had hidden, proving Arthur set fire to his own inventory for the payout after selling it on the side. Insurance fraud, clear as day. The audit came back. Victoria had drained $47,000 from the HOA fund to pay off Preston's drug debts and a research trip to Hawaii. Racketeering, embezzlement, the whole 9 yards. Cornered, Victoria filed a restraining order against me, called my ex-wife, tried every dirty trick in the book. But her power was built on fear, and once that was gone, she was finished. Her downfall was epic. At the county courthouse, the place was packed, neighbors, reporters, even folks from Seattle. Victoria showed up in an orange jumpsuit, wrist-cuffed, after being caught trying to plant drugs in my mailbox. Martha stood up first, voice trembling but proud. This woman turned our neighborhood into a prison. Tom played the security footage for the judge, and the whole room watched Victoria and Preston caught in the act. Elena laid out the financial crimes, one after another. The judge's verdict? 7 years in federal prison, restitution, lifetime ban from HOA boards. As Victoria was let out, people applauded, not out of spite but relief. Afterward, the truth about Preston came out. He went to rehab, cut ties with his mother, started over. Richard, the husband, finally admitted everything, moved away to rebuild his life. Cedar Ridge changed almost overnight. Martha took over as board president. We fixed up the place together, started a community garden, even built a workshop for the neighborhood kids. And me? I finished the cabin, made it a home again. I ended up meeting Emily, the historical society curator, who'd helped me along the way. And the place isn't empty anymore. Sometimes I stand on that porch, watch the sun set behind the mountains, and hear laughter from neighbors who aren't afraid anymore. That's when I remember what my granddad used to say, good work takes time, but justice? Justice takes guts, a sharp lawyer, and a little help from your friends. We proved you can't build a legacy on lies. Sometimes you've got to tear down the rot to make something real. But here's what keeps me up at night. Where's the line between protecting your community and becoming its jailer? If you were Preston, could you ever forgive your mother? Justice got served, but the scars are still there. Tell me what you think in the comments. Where's the line between order and tyranny? Ever faced off against an HOA? Drop your story. Let's talk about what real justice looks like.